Well, good evening, and welcome to another presentation by the Howie Diet. We bring these webinars to you monthly, and it's really our privilege to be able to share this information with you. I'm Paul Malthus, President and CEO of Howie Diet, and we have a great guest speaker and a wonderful presentation this evening on eating healthy in a protein-obsessed food culture. And Dr. Donaldson is excited about the information he has to share with you this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and just remind you to, if you have any questions, down at the bottom on your left-hand side of the screen, just go ahead and put questions in. We'll do a question and answer session toward the end and try to make sure that we get everybody's questions answered. Before we get started, why don't we just ask the Lord to bless our time together. Dear Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity to share this information, Lord, and to hold these webinars. We pray that you'll bless this time together, Lord, that you'll give Dr. Donaldson the words to say, Lord, and us the ears to hear. Pray for the technology that everything works smoothly and everybody's able to hear. And may we honor you in everything we do. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, to move right into it, Dr. Donaldson has been an invaluable asset to the science behind the Howie Diet. He's a chemical engineer graduate from Cornell University. While still working toward his doctorate at Cornell, his intent was to enter the biotechnology industry to develop remedies for sufferers of heart disease, diabetes, and other ailments. He became convinced that biotechnology drugs were not the answer and began the search to offer his expertise in the alternative nutrition field, which led him to the Howie Diet in 1997, where he has been functioning as the research director ever since. His work consists of designing and coordinating studies based on scientific symptoms or diseases and focuses on the results of the Howie Diet. He is also author of research studies that highlight the benefits of adopting a plant-based diet. Dr. Donaldson's research is ongoing, and he plays a vital role in new product development and innovations at the Howie Diet. And Dr. Donaldson, it's a real privilege to have you with us this evening, and we can't wait to see what you have to share with us.
Well, thank you, Paul, for the introduction. I'm very glad to share this information. I ran across this a while back that this is a gold mine of stuff, and I'm very glad we get a chance to share this with you. It's going to be a bit fast-paced, and we're going to go, so I hope you're listening carefully. We're recording this, too, so you'll be able to go back and catch parts that you didn't quite catch the first time through as well. So we're going to go ahead and go and get going. Anything else, Paul? Are we ready to go?
No, I think we're ready.
All right. Well, this evening here, we are talking about eating healthy in a protein-obsessed food culture, and we're looking at some things that Dr. Garth Davis wrote down in the book Proteinaholic. And here, this is some education. You need to fortify your mind to understand what it is you're supposed to eat. And we get a lot of conflict in the culture around us saying, you need more protein, you need more of this, you need more of that. And we really need the facts in front of us sometimes to really make wise decisions and to understand and have confidence in what we're eating. So that's what we're looking at tonight. Protein itself, the word protein comes from the Greek word proteos, which means of primary importance. And that's kind of what it is in our culture. It's considered primary importance here. Well, as we get started in here, we want to look at this book and look at Dr. Garth Davis and figure out, well, who is he and why does he have anything to say about this, besides just being a medical doctor. He's gone through the fire, in a sense, with this whole thing. He bought the whole line, you need more protein. And he grew up, went to medical school with it, wanted to be like his dad. And ended up learning general practice surgeon, worked as a surgeon, and through residency, medical school residency and on, trying the high protein diets himself, personally, using that. And figure out, well, everyone's kind of, sitting around too much in medical school, and they're getting sicker and sicker. And they're just, well, we just need more protein. And stuck with it, and, try more things, and it wasn't working for him. Find out that he himself had high cholesterol, high blood pressure. When he went to optometrist and he was looking in his eye, she was shocked. It was like, you have cholesterol building up in the vessels in your eye, which is a pretty advanced stage there. So he'd done it himself. He did the high protein diet himself. And he thought, this isn't working very well. So he started to read. And he was a trained as a doctor, so he could understand science. Started reading books like The Blue Zones and looking at where else do people eat that live a long time. What do they eat? And so then he decided that he would prescribe a diet that hadn't passed the test of time by a real society, people that really ate this way. So then he looked, and he kept reading. He would read a lot of studies, scientific studies, especially studies of populations of people, how they lived and how they ate for a long time. Things like Dr. Furman's Fit for Life, The Food Revolution by Dr. Joel Robbins, Eating Animals, lots of other books. Finally, the day his first child was born, he ate his first meatless meal that he could remember. And he's like 35 at the time, I think, something like that. So he was heavily invested into the protein culture. And so it took a lot of research to make him change his mind, slowly making the changes, leaving off the animal products, and seeing his symptoms go away. He didn't have to sit at a restaurant and figure out right away, where's the bathroom and how can I get there quickly if I need to. You know, the IBS went away. You know, blood pressure came back to normal, and he started running marathons, training and figuring out what to do with the extra energy that he had. As a surgeon, he was able to find people that came to his practice for weight loss that had already tried everything. They tried the high-protein diets. They tried so many different things. And when they got to him, it was, he told them what he did. And he wrote the book partly so he wouldn't have to do so much explaining and these long conversations about things. So he did get better. Well, as we look at protein, how did we get this way anyways? How did we get this way? And it was a different context, really, in the late 1600s when they're looking at protein and what was required for people to live. You know, a little bit of animal protein was actually okay because it would help keep you alive. When you're trying to fight off scarcity and starvation, you know, a little bit went a long ways. So that was the context they're in. Context has changed. Rather than dealing with infectious diseases, we're talking about chronic diseases now. And like Dr. Davis said, you know, I can only have that concern because in the developed world, we have largely eliminated the threat of deadly infectious diseases. They're not a problem anymore. But our medical model is still focused on infectious diseases and learning to take care of chronic diseases just as if they were the infectious disease. The model hasn't really changed. They're really good at taking care of acute injuries and infections. It works really well for that because that's the way it's designed. But our medical model hasn't really caught up to the change in paradigms here. But along the way, the idea of protein being of primary importance has always been there. And so along the way, it became more and more entrenched, and people along the way had raised flags and say, you know, there's a problem here. There's too much animal protein. It's not working very well. Along in the 1960s, Ansel Keys published a 7-country study. It's kind of a landmark study. He looked at 16 populations within these 7 countries. And he was able to demonstrate a strong link between saturated fat and heart disease. So here's 25-year mortality rates. See if I can get a pointer here. And it's not quite a straight line, but it's pretty good. Coming up, there's a strong correlation there. When you look at saturated fat, you can substitute animal protein for saturated fat, and the graph is going to look about the same. Because they're very strongly correlated together as nutrients. So that was in the early 60s he published this. And from there, you know, the government got involved here. And we talked with Senator McGovern, convened a committee and they set out to make dietary goals for the United States. And they finally published this in 77. And you can see the kind of things that they're looking at here. You know, they had, you know, less calories from fat, you know, less calories, especially from saturated fat, thinking this all might help with heart disease. They weren't looking at cancer or anything else, really just heart disease. The only way you could do that is to eat less meat, eat fewer dairy products, and consume more fruits, vegetables, and grains. Well, news of the final report got out before it was released fully, and war broke out in D.C., basically. And they tore that report apart until the only thing that left was that we should eat more lean meat. Instead of saying we should eat less meat, we should eat more lean meat, and declared war on fat because it seems to be the fat was the problem here. And remember, I just said that the saturated fat and animal protein were closely linked. You couldn't declare war on fat and not animal protein at the same time, but they tried to stick with the diet that they had and not give way to the American diet at all. So we started talking about nutrients rather than whole foods. We talked about fats and carbohydrates and proteins, not about meat and potatoes and starch. And, it wasn't about just the whole foods. In the middle of it, protein got off pretty good there. The war was between fat and carbohydrates. So I had a belief there with proteinholism. The first part is that protein is the most important nutrient. If you didn't have protein, you didn't really eat. Second belief is that the only place to get protein is from animals. That vegetable protein, it wasn't complete and it wasn't enough. If you really want to be big, strong, and fast, you needed to get animal protein. And Americans were all about being big, strong, and fast. They wanted to compete in the world. They wanted to be the biggest and the best. And so if you had any health problems, it probably was because you didn't have enough protein. So that's pretty much the way it ran. So that's where we got as our beliefs in protein. We're firm believers in protein as Americans here. So Dr. Garth dealt with that quite a bit, and I want to go into some different topics he moves along the way. That's how we got there, and examine different things. It talks about the Atkins diet. I'm not going to talk about that much, but the paleo diet isn't really that much different. It goes back to what you might call a caveman diet, and back to what our ancestors ate when they were just out in the wild and had to move fast and hunt and catch things and so on. And it is better in a sense because it doesn't promote any junk food in it. It's supposed to be unrefined, just whole foods, but a lot of animal flesh in the process. Well, did our ancestors really eat that way? What does the ethnographic evidence say about this whole thing? And people differ, and they say, well, yeah, we find evidence of tools and bones, so that must be what people ate. But when they go back and look at fossilized teeth, and you look to see what the food matter is on them, you find tree leaves, bark, and fruits all around the world. He says, in fact, no matter what region of the world is studied, analysis of Neanderthal teeth proves that these humans ate mostly plants, including legumes. And the paleo diet doesn't think very strongly of legumes. What about these people, the Inuit and the Maasai tribes? The Inuit live up in Greenland. They're said to be healthy. They eat a lot of fish. There's not much green stuff up there. And they don't have much heart disease. Well, it's true they don't have a lot of heart disease for their age, because they do have a lot of omega-3 intake from the fish. But he says they're really not that healthy at all. They still suffer from many chronic diseases, and on average they live 10 years fewer. So they die 10 years fewer than statistically matched Canadians. In fact, they have the worst longevity of all populations in North America. Are you sure you want to follow the Inuit? I don't think so. What about the Maasai people? There's an African tribe, and they live down in southern Kenya, northern Tanzania. All right, and the paleo supporters, promote them as that this is a really good people to follow. They're strong. They've done this. They eat lots of meat. Maybe even drink blood. And it says, well, if you look at that, there's been a study, an autopsy study of 50 Maasai, and they revealed that they really have as much heart disease as an elderly American man. They suffer with a lot of infectious diseases as well. They don't live all that long, really. And so they're very active people, so their arteries and stuff enlarged to take care of that blockage so they can get around it. But no, they're not really healthy people. And when you really put them to the test and scrutinize them, the way these people have scrutinized the people in the blue zones, you find out that the health doesn't really stand up. So what if we look at some real people, at the Sardinians, the Okinawans, the Adventists that are living? Are they healthy, and what do they eat? Turns out they do have good records for longevity, and they eat a lot of starch, eat fruits and vegetables, and they save meats for special occasions. That's what they did, the Sardinians. Okinawans, even though they live on an island, Traditionally, the majority of the calories come from purple yams. Like 70 to 80% of their calories come from that. And the traditional greeting was, "Did you get enough emu?" That's how they greeted one another. That was central to surviving there on Okinawa. Lived a long time. Same thing in Adventists. They found that among the Adventists, the vegans were about 32 pounds lighter than meat eaters, and the vegetarians were about 16 pounds lighter. So they're actually doing pretty well. And he goes into a lot more with that. And you go on, you can look at some of the modern people that have looked, and I don't have time to go through all of these, but he looked at the people in Java in Indonesia. This guy wrote, Cornelis de Langen. He was sent there in 1916 to look at internal medicine. He found people in Java were pretty healthy. They ate a lot of starch, big portions of rice, a lot of vegetables. Yeah, but they were thin, had low cholesterol, almost no heart disease, no gallbladder disease, embolisms. He noticed that people from Java that worked on the cruise ships around there were not so healthy. So he did a little experiment and put some people from Java, about 5 of them, on that Western diet and found out their cholesterol shot right up in that just the 6 weeks that he studied them. The Pima Indians, they're well known in the scientific literature for having high susceptibility to diabetes. Before that, they didn't have any trouble on their traditional diet. But when they've been displaced and placed on government dependency, eating what the government gives them, half of them are diabetic, and most of them are very large. Genetically, the Tarahumara Indians are like cousins to them, very similar in genetic disposition. And, they were made famous by the book Born to Run. They're known to be very fast, and they can run a really long time, like marathon kind of running. So, they still eat the traditional diet. At least when this was written and the people they've looked at, 85 grams of protein that they get just come from veggies. It's not a meat-eating group. Now and then, sure, but that's not the principal source of the calories in their diet. But they don't have a heart disease. They have low cholesterol, no bone disease, and it really shows out that really ancient men never really did eat a high-protein diet. And now, as before, people thrive on a lower protein, very high carb diet. That's actually what works for people. Long term, you just look at people out there actually living, not theoretically, but actually living. This is what they eat and consume. So moving on here, let's talk about diabetes for a few minutes here. So what we find here is he's claiming that meat is what causes diabetes, not carbohydrates. And you see that in the EPIC study in Europe, it's meat that's associated with type 2 diabetes. Among vegetarians in the Adventist studies, you can see that as you increase the meat, the amount of diabetes increases here. So if carbohydrates was what caused diabetes, this would be the opposite. You'd find higher rates in vegans and lower rates in those eating meat. But even weekly consumption of meat increased the risk of diabetes by 74%. Even in this group, just weekly consumption, that's not 3 times a day. So there's other things involved too, because here you have vegans, you still have some of them getting diabetes. But meat is definitely one of the factors involved there. And so what goes on here, they talk about insulin and the response of carbohydrates. But many people talking about diabetes, they forget to mention that protein also causes secretion of insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone, so when you eat, your body puts out a hormone, it shuts down liver production of glucose, and it enables the body to take in more of the nutrients that are in the blood. If you have carbohydrates and fats in there, or protein and fats, it's going to take them both up. Well, eating meat causes inflammation. As a part of it, you have some of that inflammation rises from acidity in the diet, because amino acids are acids after all. And you end up getting some fat stored in the muscles here. Due to the inflammation, you end up with insulin resistance. Some of that comes from just fat in the bloodstream as well, that you're getting fat running around. If you clear that fat out, you find that your insulin response is much better here. But the insulin resistance then leads to high blood sugar. It's not the high blood sugar that's causing diabetes, but the blood sugar is a result. It's a consequence of diabetes, not the other way around. So the key there is the insulin rises both for carbohydrates and protein. So I have a question for you here. What foods are inflammatory? On the next slide, I'll just have you fill that in, and you can just show me, what do you think? Is it dairy, eggs, dairy products, eggs? These are just in alphabetical order here. Just go ahead and fill out that survey here. What foods are actually inflammatory here? So in this audience here, we're picking the animal products, defining inflammatory eggs, some grains. Some people have some issues with grains. Nuts and seeds, not very much. Red meat, inflammatory. So that's what Dr. Garth is saying. He's saying this is the problem here. It's the animal foods that are causing inflammation. It's not the grains. It's not the legumes. It's not the nuts and seeds. And it's not the vegetables that really cause inflammation here. So let's talk about heart disease for a minute here. What happens if you eat more meat? If we look at the country of Tunisia, back in 97, they began to grow rapidly economically, and with it came a change in diet here. So they went from animal protein intake from 14% up to 27% of the total protein. And you say, well, 27%, that means, 73% of the protein was not from there. But so that's not so high, but it seems like it was a big change there. Obesity among men increased quite a bit, not as much among women, because the meat was going more to the men, not to the women. And heart disease mortality increased quite a bit. And look at this graph over here on the next slide. We see here that 680 additional deaths were caused by risk factors here. Deaths attributed to risk factor changes here. They were able to prevent 450 deaths by Western treatments because along with the economic change and growth, they were able to do, bypass surgery and stent surgery, things like that, to help prevent death. But altogether, you have 1,100 and some deaths that would have happened by the change from 97 to 2009 here. So if protein was such a good thing for heart disease, this wouldn't have happened. By increasing, going from 14% to 27% of the protein. But that's not what they found. They found additional deaths. They caused disorder, dysfunction, and it was not a good thing. What about in America? If you have a heart attack, what happens if you decide, okay, I just need to lose weight, I'm going to do a low-carb diet? So they looked at data from the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professional Follow-Up Study, developed a diet score that looked for a low-carbohydrate diet, and they compared your baseline to after your heart attack. So this is what they found here. So down here, we have total mortality in the first part of the graph here, and then cardiovascular mortality in the second part here. The LCDS stands for low carbohydrate diet score. So the higher that score, the more low carbohydrate diet you were. So your total group here, not quite significant. 1 is 0 change in risk. If the 95% confidence bar is above the line, as you see here, then you have a significant risk here. Here, the plant-based low carbohydrate diet score, no change. Animal-based, quite a bit of change here. Same, when you look at cardiovascular mortality, same story here. The animal-based low carbohydrate diet score caused problems. It was not better for them. It actually caused increased risk of death. So if you change your diet and go for a low carbohydrate diet, you just increase your risk of dying. Now, animal protein is not the only thing. I'm not going to go through all these things here, but you can see there's omega-3 fats, elevated C-reactive protein, and so on. A lot of things contribute to heart disease. Animal proteins are a really big one, but it's not the only one. This is from Life Extension, and they don't include iodine, magnesium, or bicarbonate. So there's even more factors. This is an older graph here. So they need to update their information too. But see, there's a lot of factors going on here. Along the way too, they have found that eating meat changes the bacteria in your gut here. All right, deadly changes in fact. So when you're taking in, if you look at the graphic here, if you're eating cheese, meat, eggs, take that in, you get dietary phosphatidylcholine. Your gut flora releases trimethylamine in there, and in the liver, there's enzymes that convert it to trimethylamine and oxide. That leads to atherosclerosis, which can lead to strokes, heart attack, and death. Because the trimethylamine and oxide promotes atherosclerosis. Okay, so there's a mechanism for how this works. And in studies, when they've looked at this, they find that in the first quartile, these people don't eat very much of this. They don't have high levels of TMAO in their blood. Fourth quartile has quite a bit. And the percent of heart attacks, strokes, and death increases as over the 3-year period. The fourth quartile is not faring very well. Now, you take someone, and they show that it had to do with not just the intake of it, but your habitual diet as well. If you give a vegan a steak, all right, a big steak, some vegan volunteered to do this, and they found that he didn't generate any TMAO. Very interesting. The omnivore that ate meat all the time, generated quite a bit. If you gave him a precursor, not just a steak, but a precursor for the TMAO, again, didn't generate it. But the omnivore did. It had to do with the bacteria in the gut. They found if you take an omnivore and you give him a strong dose of bacteria, of antibiotics, wipe out the bacteria in his stomach and his intestinal tract, then he didn't generate the TMAO either. But gradually back over time, the flora regenerates itself, and you feed it meat, it regenerates back the same way, and it generates the TMAO again. Now, fish has quite a bit of TMAO in it, the trimethylamine, and it seems to be a marker not just of intake of trimethylamine, but of dysbiosis in the gut as well. And found vegetarians and vegans both have lower levels. If you give them a precursor, they don't make TMAO in their gut because they don't have the flora from eating meat that meat eaters have. So if you want to avoid heart disease, don't go on a high-protein diet. It's the wrong way to go. Let's talk about obesity for a minute. I have another question for you. Does fruit contribute to weight gain, yes or no? So this guy here, he's running, trying to lose weight. Should he quit eating apples and oranges, bananas? Let you fill out the survey here and just see what you think. Maybe he should cut back on the fruit that he's eating. So as people put their vote in, well, some people say yes, fruit contributes to weight gain, obesity. The majority says no. So this big guy, maybe he should cut back on the fruit. Maybe he should eat another steak every day instead of a couple of apples. But that's not what we're finding here. So if we go on here, another question. Why is it that people who are lifting weights, doing heavy exercise, they eat protein to get bigger, faster, and stronger? And people who want to lose weight, and they want to get smaller, thinner, and leaner, they eat the same protein. How can you have that both ways? Is this food going to make you bigger and stronger, or is it going to make you smaller and leaner? Well, you want to get smaller and have muscles at the same time, I suppose. But I don't think you can have it both ways, and Dr. Davis pointed that out too. Said, no, I don't think you can have it both ways there. Some of the problems with obesity really go to caloric density. Look at 400 calories of food. 400 calories of oil, that's not even 3 tablespoons of oil there sitting in your stomach. 400 calories of beef, 400 calories of vegetables, you're going to get full. All right, your stretch receptors are going to say, you're full, stop eating. So, you need some bulk in your diet. If you're just going to eat a steak, it sits there and says, okay, it's going to feel heavy after a while. But you get accustomed to the bulk and your stretch receptors really work right. And it says, okay, that's enough. Well, doesn't protein increase metabolism? They say that they do some studies and they measure it very carefully and say, well, yes, it does. Because it's not an efficient source of energy. So in the process of converting protein into energy, it causes thermogenesis. It burns off some energy in the process because it's not efficient. If it was really efficient, it wouldn't create extra heat in the process. So a calorie is still a calorie, and excess calories still make you fat. And there's a quote from Dr. Davis here. You can see that there. Well, obesity, if you want to find out where, where the evidence really is, don't look at short-term studies. A 6-month study doesn't tell you very much. Look for long-term studies, something like the EPIC study in Europe or the Advanced Health study. Those both show you long-term, all right, this is what people usually eat, and these are the health outcomes that we usually see. As they eat less animal protein, they tend to be leaner. As I mentioned, the vegans being much lower body weight, 32 pounds on average lighter, vegetarians being 16 pounds lighter. And the Advanced Health study too, I think they're finding basically the same thing as well. So let's move on and talk about cancer for a little bit. That was obesity. Obesity is not just about carbs. You have to trim the animal protein there. Does meat cause cancer? There's lots of mechanisms. He doesn't say, oh yeah, meat causes cancer, but there's lots of different factors in here involved in ways that meat could be involved in promoting cancer. The heterocyclic amines, that's one story from high temperature and barbecuing. It creates carcinogens when you barbecue that steak stuff. What about heme iron? That's another way that you can cause cancer. Insulin-like growth factor, it's a really good story there on that one. High levels of IGF, high levels of protein intake promote high levels of IGF. And high levels of that promote cell growth, including cancer growth. The TMAO story, we talked about that a little bit already, the bowel flora changing as a result of changing your diet. You have fewer good bacteria. Methionine is in higher levels in animal foods. Plant foods don't have that high level of methionine, and they call it's an incomplete protein. But animal protein is complete. It's got everything in it, right? Well, it's complete, and it helps promote cancer as well. And other factors here as well. The neurominic acid, the 5-glycolic, the 5-GC on it here, that's not found in people here, but it's found in animals and gets put onto the cell surfaces of proteins on cells, and your body recognizes that as a foreign body, and it mounts an immune reaction to it. So you get an inflammatory response to that. Inflammation then can possibly lead to cancer as well. Changes in hormone levels, and even slaughterhouse chemicals. They found in one study that men working in a chicken slaughterhouse had 9 times the rate of penis cancer that men out in the standard population didn't have. Something's going on there. And thermal-resistant viruses and opportunity costs. If you're eating all this meat, you're not eating all the fresh vegetables. You're not eating things that really are going to help you. So there's a lot of connections there. I want to talk a little bit about the way studies are designed here. So if we look at this imaginary study here, yeah, there's problems with the way they record diets as well. But if we look at this study here, we can see, okay, these people here, we look at 1,200 people here. You got 1,000 people. And if you look across here, okay, it looks like we've got a pretty good variation in cancer rates here. What if I just take the bottom 3 quintiles here? Just quintiles 3, 4, and 5. I'll take those 600 people. And what happens if I do a study of them? Now spread those 600 people out into 5 groups. Here's the average protein intake per day, anywhere from 30 to 80 a day. Colon cancer rates are not that different. Maybe there's a slight trend. The bottom 2 there's 6, and the top 2 there's 9. So there's still a little bit of difference, but it's not the dramatic difference we saw previously in the previous slide there. So this is what we see in studies done in America. There's not very much variation in the dietary habits. So you're looking at people, and they all really eat about the same, so you can't find any trends. That's why things like the China study were so amazing and found such good results, because there's such a large variation in the kind of diets that people are eating. Same thing in the Advanced Health studies. There's quite a bit of variation, because there's people eating meat and there's pure vegans as well. So there's quite a bit of variation in those studies. In those studies, you're more likely to find good results there. There's a good group, the World Cancer Research Fund out of London and the American Institute for Cancer Research. Colin Campbell was involved in the startup of this here. They've done this review here since late 90s, 97. I remember getting the book, and they continually update it. There's no ties to government or industry ties. They don't take money from there. These are their recommendations. This is basically a plant-based diet. Limit the red meat, processed meat. When you follow this, in one study they showed that those who basically said yes to the first 6 of these had a 34% decreased risk of cancer. So you need to follow these guidelines, and they're not that difficult. But you do have to eat basically a plant-based diet and avoid sugary stuff. Yeah, you can't do that. Limit the junk food. Be physically active as part of your life. So, how much protein do we really need? Well, the RDA says 0.8 grams per kilogram of body mass, and that's conservative on the upper side. The story, Dr. Davis says, is more like this. Amino acids are bricks. They're necessary and good. When you build your house, you need lots of bricks, and you need a few for maintenance. But if someone keeps giving you a load of bricks every day and just piling up the bricks, what are you going to do with those? You're going to stumble over them. They're in the way. They're in the yard. They're making a mess. It's just a dangerous nuisance. That's what protein is. You need to look at amino acids as building materials. You don't need excess building materials. You need sufficient amounts, yes. And your body's very good at recycling this, but you don't need excess amounts. It's actually hard on your body. It's detrimental to have too much. The key really is to get enough calories here. And if you don't want to waste away, then eat enough calories. If you want to build muscle, then eat enough calories. If you're an athlete, you can take a 20-gram protein drink after the workout. That works pretty good. Get some carbs with it. If you're elderly, you want to eat an alkaline diet. That's acidity in your diet is what's going to cause the muscles to waste away, right? Because that acid has to be neutralized, and it starts by taking the calcium out of your muscles. Even before it takes it out of the bones, it's going to take calcium from your muscles. So you need to follow an alkaline diet, and that will take care of the loss of protein there. So Dr. Garth Davis puts it this way. If you like eating, if you like counting, eat the RDA. Don't worry about it. If you don't like counting, then just don't worry about it. I like that. Just don't worry about it. So how are you going to make your goals here? How are you going to make the switch? Many of you, I think, you've already made the switch, but how do you convince people to make a switch? You have to write down your health goals, your life goals. How are you going to accomplish those? You need to make your diet help you make those things. Write them down, have them handy when you're tempted by foods that don't help you reach your goals. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing he gives you a tip on is to visualize your food source. And you can look at that slide there. I'm not going to read it all for you here. Let me tell you a little bit of his story. Because he assumes that people assume that he has the same cravings that they do. And it's not that way. Says it doesn't take superhuman willpower for me to decline a double cheeseburger because I find cheeseburgers repulsive. My friends watch a fast food commercial and crave the cheeseburger, thinking how great it tastes. I look at a picture of a cheeseburger and think how ugly it looks. So bland, so colorless. I also picture the greasy stove where the meat was cooked, all black and oily. I picture some teenage kid listlessly flipping the frozen meat without any care for its preparation. I picture the slaughterhouse where the meat actually came from. I imagine the horrible life and death of the cow itself, not to mention all the chemicals and antibiotics it was fed before its flesh was mixed with pink slime to become ground meat. I then picture that slime building up in my vessels and invading the cells that make up my body. Finally, and maybe most important, I picture how I would feel after eating that burger. Following a possible moment of initial enjoyment, I would begin to feel bloated and disgusted. I would get indigestion and experience fatigue. I could even picture the fat forming on my organs and slowing me down, sapping my vigor and will to live. That's the negative picture that he paints for himself. Now, offer me an avocado and kale salad, on the other hand, and just watch Pavlov's response kick in. The beauty of all the colors in a great salad really get my juices flowing. I marvel at the care and preparation of the salad, and I picture the love that went into growing the vegetables on the organic farm. Most of all, I can feel the salad, as corny as it may sound. I can feel the salad nurturing my body. I feel myself growing stronger with each bite. So it's no great feat for me to pass up the meat, nor is it some Spartan chore to eat vegetables. I'm just like everyone else. I seek the things that make me feel good and avoid things that I just don't like. The difference is simple yet profound. Listen now. Unlike most people, I've trained myself to be more attuned to what is really good for me and what is not, and thereby changed my tastes. Rather than feeling deprived, I am privileged to have discovered and mastered a new and rewarding lifestyle. I don't live this way to be healthier when I'm old or to live longer. I've adopted this new lifestyle because it makes me feel vibrant right now. My quest for the right way to eat has truly set me free from all my old desires. So visualizing where his food came from is a big part. He pictures that. He's like, okay, that's not a good picture. And yet the picture of the salad, the vegetables, that's a good picture. And that health, that vibrancy that comes from that. So remember where your food comes from. So those are some of the things from the book. That's to whet your appetite, perhaps. There's more. You can get the book. You can purchase it right through here. We get a little kickback from Amazon for doing that as an affiliate with them. So I encourage you to read the book. I couldn't have possibly, done all of, justice to all of it. There's a lot of evidence in there. Goes into the science. It's easy to read, understand. One of my teenage boys has read through it. It's good stuff, good education in there. So I highly recommend it, and I think that's where we are right now. Paul, I think we have time for some questions here, so we can do that now.
That sounds great. Thank you, Dr. Donaldson. That's really great information, good insights on the book. Did the book differentiate at all between, traditionally grown animal products and what somebody would consider grass-fed or pasture-raised? Was there any distinction in any of that?
He gave some good examples from the Argentinian gauchos, the cowboys down there. Access to really high-quality meat. It's not treated with antibiotics. It's the good stuff there. And he found that even there, they're getting the same disease from pure animal products. And we said that's pristine stuff. And they're getting just as sick. So it's inherent. The animal protein is the problem. It's not just the antibiotics. It's not chemicals in the animal protein. It's the animal protein itself.
Yeah, it continues to cause the inflammation that people are experiencing. We had a couple of other... Go ahead.
It's not just what's added to the meat. That's a problem too, factory farming and all that. But at that level of protein we're eating, from animals, it's not sustainable for your body any way you do it, pure or not.
How would you translate the amount of protein that we need, not in grams, but in, is there a way to, how many nuts do you need, or somebody's asking how to put that into practical explanation of how much protein should we consume?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I could do that right off my head. I would just, get some information from a database, the USDA database, how much there is per weight of almonds, how many grams of protein in there, and you can figure it out about how many grams and about how much that weighs. But I haven't done it myself yet.
Somebody wants you to be their doctor. They want to know where your practice is.
I think you can call Dr. Davis as well. I think he's open for business. I don't have a practice like that.
Somebody asked about the ketogenic diet and whether it'll starve cancer. Any thoughts on that?
The ketogenic diet is a little bit different from just a high animal protein diet because it emphasizes a lot of fat. Most of the calories are coming from fat, not from carbohydrates or protein. Now, it may still have some animal protein in there, and that would be a problem with that. There's some good evidence for it, but I think if it's animal-based, I think you're still going to have problems there. It needs to be a plant-based diet, and you can probably have some fat in there, and it might be okay. I think some evidence we've shown from Gerson not in the Gerson Clinic, but from Oasis of Hope, seems to indicate that fat is not a good thing to have for cancer either. So you find that the cancer can feed on a high-fat diet, can feed on a high-protein diet, can feed on sugar. So you need to limit all of those things to some extent. It's enough to pull your hair out sometimes, I suppose. But you're going to have to look at evidence and see what really has worked for people. And not just the newfangled stuff, but what really has worked to help turn cancer around. Dr. Gerson did it for a long time. And, you know, it was a lot of fresh vegetable juice and vegetarian food. And he started with that. And at some point he added a small amount of animal protein back into the diet. I think that was for weight reasons and things. I think you could do it with vegetable protein as well. I don't think you had to have the animal protein per se there. You just needed some more protein there. But I think the jury's still out on the ketogenic diet.
What do you think about the essential protein? What would be somebody's usage of that?
I think if someone was lean and they were, let's say, if they weren't eating enough calories, they thought they're kind of on the borderline, a serving a day would be okay. I wouldn't necessarily do a lot more than that. You know, it gives you 22 grams or so more protein a day, and that would be okay. That's a good amount. That's not going to push you over the top by any means. And it's plant-based, and the plant-based proteins are always safer still than the animal-based proteins. But I wouldn't try to live on them.
Have you looked at the bone broth? It's so popular these days. Is it as bad as regular animal protein?
You know, I don't know how much protein is in the bone broth. I think more electrolytes. There's collagen in there, I think, too. And someone had some information about lead contamination from the bones in the bone broth. I'm not sure if that's been verified, but that's a question in my mind, whether it's actually a good source, because lead from the environment goes to the bones. So bones tend to be a repository of lead in the body. So I'm not sure it's a really good thing to soak them in water and eat that. I would say that we don't need that either.
Right. Yeah. Somebody's husband eats mostly vegetarian, but still craves meat. And anytime they go out, he always orders a steak or a burger. She's wondering if he's, missing something in his diet that's causing him to crave the meat, or.
I'm not sure he's missing something so much. It could just be that he's not all just bought in with a program. He still thinks, most of vegetarian would just want meat now and then. And that's not the worst thing, but in a sense you end up elevating the animal protein to a higher level. To say, I'm going to get a treat, I'm going to get some animal protein. And there could be some danger to that. Thinking that I'm depriving myself the rest of the time, but now I'm going to treat myself with this, quote, good food. And the teenagers are going to see that and says, well, I want more of that good food. Not just every once in a while. I want it all the time. What's wrong with it? So it is going to take some education there. And, this book is a good one to work with teenage boys especially. Yeah, so I would get the book.
That's good. That's good advice. So if somebody has high blood pressure but not diabetic and is asking how that's possible, she thinks she heard you say that heart disease is caused by diabetes.
No, they kind of flow together in the talk, going from one to the other. But the high blood pressure can be just of its own, not related to diabetes. they can come together, but you can have essential high blood pressure, which means the doctors say, well, we don't know what causes it. It's just essential. It doesn't have another cause. We don't know what it is, but that, it's not caused by some other disease. But you do the changes that Dr. Garth Davis is talking about, and it tends to go away.
Somebody asked about they're moving to a plant-based diet gradually. What can I have for breakfast that doesn't involve dairy or animal products?
Oatmeal. Lots of ways to fix oatmeal, and it doesn't require any animal products at all. In fact, Dr. Davis says that's what he has for breakfast. He has oatmeal. And there's I think he fixes it lots of different ways, too. And that's just the base. It's kind of like a potato. It doesn't have to go all one way. You can make savory oatmeal. It doesn't have to be sweet at all. Different ways to do it.
And somebody had bariatric surgery in March, and the doctor stressed high protein and low carbs.
The doctor's saying you should have high protein, low carbs?
That's correct.
Yeah, it sounds like the doctor that used to be Dr. Davis, because he used to tell that to people too, promote protein shakes and all of that, and he just hasn't been educated. He's just repeating what he's heard. It's not based on sound science. That's the mantra, and that's the culture that he's swimming in as well. So you might want a different doctor.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
If you're relying on your doctor for nutritional information, at least. If you just need him to, do tests and diagnosis, tell you what's wrong, but you have to ignore his advice on how to fix things. If you have a good relationship with him and he lets you do that, that's fine.
That's great. We've pretty much gone through all the questions we have. Any final thoughts, Dr. Donaldson, before we say goodnight?
No, it takes a transforming of the mind. It does take education. It takes rethinking and having the facts in front of you and remembering the facts, because a lot of thoughts come across towards us. So we have to put the good things into us, into our minds, and from there we change our beliefs, and that changes our habits, and then that changes us.
Well, that's great advice, and we sure appreciate your time this evening and putting the program together, and for the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. I hope it's very helpful to you.
Yeah, it sure is. And thanks, everyone, for joining us for another presentation of How You Diet. Until next month, we trust that the Lord keeps you healthy, and we look forward to talking to you again next month. Thank you, and God bless.